Okay, hi guys. So this is the last lecture on this topic, the uprisings, and we're gonna investigate Yemen and like quick reference to Bahrain, and then I'm gonna bring like different threads together in order to investigate like the different trajectories of the uprisings. So this is like the makeup lecture, the second makeup lecture, and then we're gonna have like two more lectures, and that's it. So for so we covered so far Syria and Egypt, Libya and Tunisia, and then we haven't talked, perhaps like at all about Yemen um, throughout the semester. We just hinted at, when the military intervention, of Nasser, and the struggle between Nasser and the reactionary and conservative monarchies, especially Saudi Arabia, but we didn't talk about, Yemen and the political process and the historical development there. So that's why we're gonna like investigate in some detail kind of the uprising there. Um, so actually, the unification between the North and the South happened in 1990, and before like 12 years before the unification in 1990, Ali Abdullah Saleh actually dominated the political scene and governed and led the North for 12 years before 1990. So it was like, this division between like the North Yemen Arab Republic and then the People's Democratic Republic of Yemen in the south, and it remained despite the fact that the unification happened. But after the outbreak of the uprisings, the issue, it surfaced again, and like some separatists, tried to press, their demands, or to pressure the central government in order to get, some sort of autonomy, and to get like, more to push for more demands for representation and equality. So it was like there. So it did like overshadow, the political dynamics and the political interaction between different players. After the departure of Abdullah Saleh. Um, so like as like, other countries in the region, it was like, so Saleh like established, this authoritarian and dominant political rule under the and his own party, like the General People's Congress. Um, Regarding like the opposition map before the uprising, so like Yemen, it had like, some sort of secessionist movements, and what the literature mentions, like they had like, subnational demands. So that's why it was not about, pressing for some national and political for political reform programs, but they had like, their own goals and separatist orientation. So, and they had like they had also some militant groups or armed groups as well. So before that was like the the Houthis actually, it was like before the uprising. So they went through like, armed conflict with the central government in 2004 through 2009. So like two main, like, oppositional groups that actually represented, uh, or were perceived as like, threatening forces to Saleh's regime. One in the north, the Houthi, the armed groups of Shia, actually named for its fallen commander Badruddin al-Houthi. And in the south, it was like, Hirak, or it was like, secessionist movement that actually rejected any sort of the northern dominance since 1994, after the end of the civil war there. So actually, the movement or Hirak asked for, or had like had asked for, this kind of greater share of the wealth of the country, and some form of fair representation and the return, to the status quo before the unification state. So when they after the outbreak of the uprisings, so they started to advance their subnational demands, um, while while other forces, most especially like the youth and students, they ask for or they advance their own national political demands. Um, so like the protest actually erupted in February 2011, and actually inspired by what was going on in the region, especially after the ousting of Mubarak and Ben Ali. So like they started to push for, like, protesters, they started to push for same political demands in order to reshape the political regime. And like a common story, like the regime responded with harsh crackdown on the protesters, and this actually intensified and triggered more or intensified the protest and the social mobilization throughout the country. Um, so after after a month of the outbreak of the uprisings there, uh, some like elements from the military started to defect, and actually they rejected the idea of, like, the uh, Saleh actually had a plan, for succession in order to transfer power, to his son, or like to distribute more of the, like, the power, the political positions to his family, or to make it like kind of dynastic, family there. So that's why some elements inside the military grew angry at his, like, domineering approach and his, like, future plan of succession. So this increasing, despotic power on the part of Abdullah Saleh actually triggered or motivated, some of the officers in order to take, the side of the protesters. Um, so he had, like, he had his own, like, authoritarian and despotic power, but he was not able, to command the same level of loyalty that was actually available to Bashar in Syria, for example, because of the, like, the the reality of the Alawites as a sect. Um, so like in a month, actually, the, like, several officers and different, like, elements inside the, especially, like, top army commanders, they defected, and they joined, the rebellion, and the military obviously had split. So this, in a way or another, actually helped the protesters, because they had their own, like, representative body. It was called the joint meeting parties. It gathered different elements from different ideological background. Most especially, like, they had, like, Islamist, like the majority, or the big, partner in this, like, meeting of parties or joint meeting of parties. It was, like, the Islamists. It was, like, most especially Islah Party. Um, it's kind of ideologically related to the Brotherhood. So it's like Sunni, like, Islamist group, and as well, like, they have, like, the Socialist Party that actually governed and ruled the South until the unification, and they had, like, three more small parties. It's the Party of Truth. It was like moderate Shia party from Zaidi sect, and they have, like, some popular Nasserist, and the Union of popular forces as well. So it gathered, like, different political, different, ideological forces, and like having, like, the factors, within or between them, it helped them or increased their like, bargaining position and the leverage, in their negotiation with the regime. Um, so actually, the joint meeting parties, like the as an entity actually claimed, the representation of the protesters, and they started this negotiation with the regime. Um, like at the same time, the GCC actually offered a proposal in order to break, with any political stalemate. It was, I think, in February, and it was like in a few weeks, after the eruption of the outbreak of the uprisings. But the joint meeting parties actually endorsed the or adopted, this proposal in April. And according to this proposal, it was like, according to the proposal, Saleh actually um, had to resign, and with kind of amnesty. He was, allowed to escape any kind of prosecution. And having, like, as I mentioned, the factors, with the joint meeting parties, this actually improved or strengthened the position of the meeting parties, and favored, their bargaining position in relation to like the incumbents, or the Saleh's, loyalists. Uh, and then, like, so the mass mobilization in this sense actually opened, or gave way to different political elites to get to the negotiation table, and to have some form of consensus. Um, like, and of course, like, some international and regional support as well helped, with pushing for that direction. So the United States and Saudi Arabia, most especially, actually, they expressed, um, their support or their demand, to Saleh, in order to depart, from power. And of course, like, Saudi Arabia, it had, like, its own like strategic calculations, and in order to protect, the borders, and in order to preserve, its ruling family. um, so actually, they pushed, for the implementation of the GCC proposal. But again, like, Saleh actually survived, several months after the outbreak of the uprisings, and this actually enabled him to proceed with his kind of like a tactic, or an orientation, in order not to relinquish, like, or to give in, or to concede, a little bit of political power, without actually giving, or conceding too much to the demands of the protesters, or, like, embracing, the GCC proposal. Um, so that was, like, until, like, the situation, was, like, escalation of the protest, and the violence, on the part of the regime. And Saleh actually kept deferring and delaying, any sort of implementation of the GCC proposal. That was until, like, the June attempt, that actually, it was like, the protesters, tried to assassinate him. And it was in June. It was like kind of a rocket attack that left him, like, severely injured. So he had to left, to Saudi Arabia for medical treatment, and this actually intensified the battle between his loyalists and the army defectors. So it was actually, the country was on the brink of, like, a civil war. So after, like, he actually left the country for 6 months, and then he returned to Yemen, in order to retain power, or to reestablish, his control over power. Um, but during that period, actually, several political players tried to reconsider, their political positions. So for the White House, actually, advised, Saleh to step down and to resign and to accept, without any kind of delay, the GCC plan. Um, so after, like, the like few months, he returned to Sana'a in order to retain power. But at the same time, it was not like 6 months. I think like 3 or 4 months, because like at the same time, like, the Qaddafi actually had fallen, and then the United Nations Security Council like adopted this resolution 2014, in order to push, Saleh to honor his own promise, in order to step down and to implement the GCC proposal and initiative. And this, like, would the GCC initiative had its own, like, a political solution or political settlement by endorsing, the initiative and the implementation of the like the political settlement. Based on this, without any further delay, this would, like, resolve the situation, in Yemen during that period. So actually, it took, like, several months for him to concede or to leave power. And he actually left. He departed on February 21st in 2012, like, after almost 1 year of protest. And he got, like, safe exit. He with amnesty. He didn't subject to any kind of persecution. Um, so, like, his vice president actually like became a president, but it was like through like a single candidate referendum. So he actually emerged as Abd Rabbu Mansour al-Hadi actually emerged as like a consensus candidate of the regime, rather than, like, a radical or a revolutionary figure. So actually he adopted, this scheme of transition that was like coming from, like, within the ruling elite or the ruling circle. He adopted, this kind of gradual approach to transition. Um, so initially supposed to have, like, to write a constitution in 2 years after, the departure of Saleh in February 2012. And then like after, like, writing a new the new constitution, this would allow for this multi-party parliamentary and presidential elections, to follow after the writing the constitution. um, but actually, again, like, this kind of carefully managed or negotiated transition left, like, the same, patronage and networks, intact. So that's why the loyalists and the supporters of Saleh and his like ruling party, like, remained in place and dominated the General People's Congress, actually dominated, the parliament. And that it triggered, some sort of reaction for the part of oppositions, in order to eliminate or to eradicate, the supporters or the loyalists of Saleh's regime, instead of, like, seeking or abiding by this elite consensus. So it had, like, some disadvantages as well. Uh, so they were not able actually to eliminate or to get rid of, the Saleh's network as well, and his own, like, his own party. And again, like, the the threatening, source, came from separatist and like other fierce opposition in Yemen. So unlike, the opposition, for example, in Egypt and Tunisia, that they actually remained kind of committed to to maintaining, the existing polity structure. So they're, like, in Yemen, they had, like, totally different orientation, and they needed, kind of autonomy and restructure the existing um, polity characteristics. Um, and so like you have like Houthis actually in the north and the Iraq in the south, and the very existence of like some Al-Qaeda affiliated groups as well, like they called itself the guardians of Islamic law, Ansar al-Sharia in the south as well. So this added different another layer of instability and difficulty to reach or to implement this kind of elite consensus, um, given the existing reality there. So in actually, despite of the different attempt to have like this to get the opposition incorporated into the polity structure by forming the national unity government, for example, the ministerial posts actually were divided equally between like the loyalists or the incumbents or the supporters of the old regime and the opposition, but actually the same like the key ministers actually remained in place, especially the defense and the foreign affairs. And one of the like the despite the fact that like the minister of interior came from like al Islah party as an Islamist party, but he was not a civilian figure. He actually served as a general in the Yemeni police force. So this actually like triggered more opposition from or revolutionary demands, because actually that was it didn't go in line with the revolutionary demands young people and students actually asked for. So they started pressuring for more like more demands in order to especially in order to restructure the army or the military establishment. Um, so he actually El Hadi actually tried to undertake several measures in order to erode or to eradicate the Salah's networks. So he firstly actually dissolved the Republican Guards that was like full of the loyalists of the Ali Abdullah Saleh, and it was like commanded by his son. And then he removed as well like the Saleh's half brother as chief of the air forces and the air defense, and his nephew that actually served as a commander uh, of like anti-terrorist forces or anti-terrorist unit. So that's why he managed to eliminate some of they resisted in the beginning, and then they had to resign, and then he undertook some of the like reassignment measure of some military commanders as well, that they were known for their loyalty to Ali Abdullah Saleh. But this like despite the fact that he implemented some of these like reform measures, is still like and this triggered some sort of defiance by Saleh and his cronies, and he actually remained he continued to play, like giving him a space to escape the country without any form of trial. This allowed him to scheme against the existing government in Yemen, and to play a political role from outside. Um, so this actually like scheming from outside, and the very existence of like disturbing oppositional forces, Al Qaeda and some other opposition came from tribes as well, because it's kind of even the military was based on this kind of tribal alignment with some loyalists that they supported Ali Abdullah Saleh and others that they actually defected, or they had affiliation with other tribes that actually opposed Ali Abdullah Saleh. So the scene actually was like highly fragmented. Um, so he took some measures in order to concede to to some of the revolutionary demands, but still, like, the same, like, establishment, or the political, the power structure, the power structures actually remain roughly the same. So one of the mechanisms, actually, like the like the proposal, or the different, regime forces and different, opposition forces agreed on, just to have like extensive plan for inclusion through like establishing a mechanism for national dialogue. So that's why they had like this inclusive, national dialogue conference, um, that was like based on the GCC initiative and proposal as well. So this established, the national dialogue conference, and it drew together different political forces from the youth, and from like the Hirak in the south, and Houthis, and women, and some representatives of the civil society, plus some like tribal dignitaries, and some religious leaders as well. So they started, the mission in March 2013, roughly like 2 years after the outbreak of the uprisings. Um, but again, although like it was like kind of like a sincere attempt to have like, a dialogue in order to reach a consensus between different political and social forces, participants actually didn't succeed in reaching, this consensus, especially on major political and social issues, including, this unrest in the south, and the future form of the government. Um, so the actually the thorny task was like, this relationship between like the separatists in the south, or like movement in the south, and the central government. Uh, so the National Dialogue Conference actually offered, this for them, from their position, it offered them like, unprecedented, the opportunity to press, or to push for more demands, uh, making use of the absence, or of the central authority. That was like, since 2007. So it was like, an opportunity it was like, like an opportunity for them in order to capitalize on, or to invest in order to earn, uh, some military or economic and distributional and representative advantages. Uh, so they actually, this actually drove them towards, the uh, secessionist demands. So in order to make, the most out of the situation, so they actually opted for, this maximalist strategy. Um, so they actually didn't, like they opted for the like a federal structure as well, and that's why they rejected this, because this would like enable the central government to have like, like this federal structure actually would create unique conditions for the central authority in order to intervene, in their affairs, and to share and exploit, some of their economic revenues and oil revenues. And this actually, that was on the one hand, and on the other hand, this actually satisfied no one as well from Saleh's camp or loyalists. So this would undermine, the patronage and the network and the power basis of the Saleh's cronies. So that's why, like, the formula of this national dialogue conference actually satisfied no one. Um, Especially with regard to the main issues, the unrest, in the south, and this federal form of the government. Um, so and actually they had like, their own like they resolved, other issues regarding, the presidential elections that the elections were scheduled for February 2014. and like the El Hadi actually appointed a 17-member committee in order to draft a new constitution in March 2000 and for 2014. But actually and it managed, to he rushed through the constitution writing, but actually the process got interrupted by the Houthi demonstration in September 2014. But over, like, the during that period, it was like, like over the course of like 2013 2014, state authority like deteriorated totally, especially because of the existence of this political stalemate between different political forces, and this armed conflict that like broke out across several fault lines. So first you have, like, the Iraq and or Houthis first against, Islah Party or Islamist, and then Iraq secessionist against, the Yemeni army, and then you have, like, Al Qaeda affiliated group that actually seized large territories, and some sort of, like, unidentified forces, but the often, related to or blamed actually on Saleh and his cronies, that escalated, violent attacks on um, some infrastructures and oil pipelines. So it was like, total deterioration of the central authority, and that actually abruptly ended, the national dialogue in September 2014, and like the process actually came to an end with the Houthi demonstrations that actually managed to actually they swept down from, I'm gonna show you in the map. Yeah, it was actually from here, from the north, from northern, Yemen into, the southern part, and they seized power, in Sana'a, and placed, Mansour al-Hadi under house arrest. So, and then forced him to escape to Aden before he made it to Oman. Um, so actually, it was like, they tried first, like the Houthis actually presented themselves or framed, their action, their revolutionary action within, this revolutionary frame, and they claimed, this revolutionary presentation or revolutionary uh, identity. But with the engagement of Saudi Arabia and other, like, GCC or other Gulf countries, actually they tried, to frame them as, like, the Shia groups that actually were backed by Iran. Um, so the now, like, the national dialogue conference actually came to an end. That actually it managed to brought, different stakeholders in order to reach a consensus in this, like, highly and long fragmented, polity in Yemen. But like the proposal actually did it, like, satisfied roughly nearly no one in Yemen. So that's why even before it was like the final showdown with the Houthis, seizure of power in September 2014. But it was actually a political stalemate, a long political stalemate between different political players before Houthis, action. And they managed actually in the beginning to gain, or to attract some white supporters beyond their local bases in Yemen by positioning again themselves as, um, for a sort of, revolutionary forces uh, opposing, the traditional Yemeni elites. So they kind of rejected the GCC, agreement of November 2011, and the actually it increased kind of like hostility and among wide range, of Yemeni political actors. And then, Saudi stepped in order to oppose, any sort of compromise with Houthis. Uh, Saudi actually considered Yemen as its sphere of influence, so that's why it tried, its best in order to frame, the struggle as, or to strip Houthis actually of any revolutionary identity, and to frame the movement as like a Shi'i backed by Iran. And they actually managed to do this in order to erode, wide social basis, and to mobilize different, tribes and different political forces against them inside Yemen. And that was on one hand, and on the other hand, it managed to gather, some regional support or regional coalition against Houthis in Yemen. So that was like ranging from, Islah, to some of the southern secessionists in support of their what they called what's or Al Saud, or the Saudi regime called the legitimate president, in reference to Mansour al-Hadi. So Saudi actually began its air campaign called Operation Decisive Storm in April 2015. So that was like it coincided with some sort of negotiations over like a nuclear deal with Iran and the United States. So partly it was like, a sign, or like, the try to get, the some sort of like, agreement, or to compel like the United States to demonstrate its support for the air campaign, in as an indication, to basically, to Iran and like its proxies about the U.S. commitment, to the Gulf Alliance. So it was like motivated by, like, a strategic, interest, and its struggle and fight against Iran. Um, and in the meantime, Saudi actually worked hard in order to mobilize tribal and personal network in order to fight against, Houthis inside Yemen. Um, and in August, actually from April to August, Saudi managed to achieve its first victory by establishing kind of a foothold in Aden, and like, facilitated like a temporary return of El Hadi government to Yemen. Uh, Emirates as well got engaged and involved in the war, and landed like 1,000 of its, like, forces for the battle. So it was like, the only coalition partner that actually declared its withdrawal in July 2019, but actually it continued to support, the transitional council and some secessionists, and separatists in the south, in Yemen. Um, so it was like, although like Saudi managed, to achieve kind of victory and facilitated, the to preclude, some sort of advance, in Aden, but it faced other difficulties with other areas, like especially like Houthi controlled areas. So here you have like the areas, Houthi controlled. It's this kind of light orange, and you have here like the blue ones, the blue signs, the where the coalition troop actually stationed or positioned, the themselves, or the forces. So they actually captured, large territories, or they had control over, large territories. That was by like June 2019. and that was, the like the gradual, advance to the south, from the north to the south, all like the red areas and the pinky one. So that was like, dominated by them. And here you have like, the still like the blue one, the Houthi forces actually controlled, these territories, and the red ones, marked the conflict zones, and the purple and the green ones, the existence of the UAE backed, anti-Houthi forces in Yemen. So it became like, an arena for this, like, the regional intervention as well. And this actually led to like a humanitarian disaster, uh, relative to, or in comparison to the military gains or the military purpose. It was like, heavy um, humanitarian cost in relation to the military purpose or the military gains achieved. So it was kind of indecisive, air campaign that actually continued for 5 years with, like, as I mentioned, high humanitarian cost, without, achieving any sort of like military goals in relation to the cost paid or invested in this air air campaign or the military campaign. Okay, for Bahrain, so actually it was like, very short, like roughly a month. It was like a very short in terms of duration of the uprisings. So again, like, discontented, especially like, Shia groups, inspired by what was going on in the region. So they actually arranged or coordinated the Day of Rage as well on 14th of February 2011. Uh, so like tens of thousands actually participated in the first day of the uprisings or the demonstrations, in order to, most of them actually from Shia majority, and they didn't call for like the fall of Al Khalifa or for the fall of the regime, but actually they asked for some sort of political reform, like moderate reforms, like some cabinet, replacements, especially like to replace like the what the prime minister, that they were considered sort of like, hardliner, and some other, like, members of the royal family, and they asked for constitutional reform and free election for a parliament, and again, like, some human rights demands, like, the end of torture, and to, like, the release of some political prisoners. Um, so despite the fact these, like, kind of political demands were moderate, but Al Khalifa or the royal family actually didn't accept any sort, or didn't seem to concede or to accept, any sort of these moderate political demands. Uh, but it was like quite the opposite. They actually responded to these demands by through like heavy hand by adopting this heavy-handed strategy, and they cracked down on. They started, to crack down on the protesters. So this led to, it had like, some sort of contradictory results, like the crackdown or the heavy-handed strategy actually intensified, the political demands, or it actually motivated demonstrators, to press for more demands or to escalate, their demands, and the regime as well, escalated its violence and repression against protesters. um, but the international context and the regional context as well didn't help protesters. So the U.S. it established like since like its independence since the Bahrain actually gained its independence in 1971. So the United States had its own like some sort of like support unit. The Minister of Defense, it had its like administration or the support unit in Bahrain that actually served as or catered, to the military base there in Bahrain. So it had like some sort of a strategic, and military interest in the area. That was the United States. It pushed it to the White House to embrace, this kind of rhetorical, pressure for reform while supporting the ruling family. Um, Saudi Arabia, it had like its own like strategic interest in Bahrain as well. It because of the geographical proximity and because of the very existence of Iran as well, with the fact that the Shia majority in Bahrain, they represented or the most threatening force during that period. So the Saudi Arabia actually adopted more. Or took this hard line and conservative political stand, and signaling that no consensus whatsoever should be given or made to Shia protesters during that period. So after a month, um, or a month of, and few days, like basically Saudi Arabia sent like a thousand troops, and the Emirates actually sent like some soldiers as well, and Qatar with the help of some Qatari contingent, and Kuwait as well provided some naval support. But basically, it was like the Saudi Arabia forces actually enabled Bahrain Defense Forces to crack down on the protesters by actually protecting, the key institutions around, the country, and allowed, the Bahraini forces in order to crack down on and they cleared actually the square, in after a month and a few days of the outbreak of the uprisings. So like during like that was like like one of the protests that actually came to an end, after or aborted, right after its emergence. But for like for Yemen and Libya and Syria, it was like the region, with the involvement of some international and regional forces. This actually prolonged, the struggle because of this intra coalition or alliance competition between different countries, especially from like the Gulf states. And then in Syria, when Russia actually stepped in, and then United States to support with the help of the Iraqi and Kurdish forces in order to fight the Islamic State there. So to block, its advance. The region actually became kind of an arena for proxy wars. So you had like some sort of like different trajectories. Some countries managed to make smooth transition, kind of a smooth or successful transition, like Tunisia, and then Egypt. It had like some sort of elections that enabled transition, and then the reinstallation of authoritarianism, or like a new gave way to another wave of protest that actually gave way to reinstallation or reinstatement of authoritarianism in the country. And then you have prolonged civil war in Syria, and like with multiple kind of insurgency groups fighting on the ground with the help of their sponsors and patrons outside Syria. You have Turkey, Qatar, and Saudi, and then Yemen as well, with the basically like the intervention of Saudi Arabia and Emirates. and then like Bahrain actually it put down, the protest, like in a month, but actually with the help of the regional intervention as well from Saudi Arabia. And so you have like civil wars and some sort of transition, and like transition to like peaceful alternation of power, and then like wave that led to a military coup that reinstated or gave rise to a new authoritarian regime in Egypt. So like bringing like different threats together. So here you have like the outbreak of the uprisings, or like social and political mobilizations that led to different political outcomes, in a sense that it led to like civil wars in some cases, and transition, regardless of like what form of regime like emanated from this transition. uh, so actually I had a plan, to discuss this in class, or to have a discussion, about um, one of the readings, I assigned, for this topic. So you have like Waterbury chapter. He talked about democracy without Democrats. So let's first, discuss, this idea about you might have like a democratic regime, or you might help with the emergence of democratic regime without having, genuine or like committed kind of Democrats. So the idea here is like it's actually based on like a rationality assumption, rationality regarding to the actors, the behavior, and their expectations as well. So the idea here, before like going into what Waterbury said, so the idea here, democracy would emerge as a second best solution to any sort of intractable like conflict of interest between political elites. So you have like different parties that actually and political stalemate, and they needed to have like a solution to this like kind of political stalemate. Uh, so these parties, they had like they might have no experience at all, and a little normative commitment to democracy, but because of the strategic situation and the strategic choice they made, so they might enable democratic governance or democratic rule to come into being or to emerge. So you have here like kind of three phases or three stages. So you have here like political struggle. um, it's like what happened during the some cases of the third wave of democratization in Southern Europe and in Latin America. So you have here like some sort of like political struggle and political mobilization led by opposition and new political actors. And then it's kind of a stalemate, like no one could like secure any kind of to win over the other. So this would push different actors to the negotiation table in order to have like a compromise, that what literature called pacts, or like pacted transition. um, so it's usually like referred to as like a pact. And when they get to the negotiation table and they agreed on a pact, because of like this would enable some sort of like electoral dynamics to take place, and then the repeated democratic games, uh, like this kind of would allow for some sort of like repetitive and like some sort of iteration of these electoral processes, and this would secure, presumably would produce the habituation. it's possibly over time, like citizens would like positively identified with the democratic rules and democratic norms as well. Um, but in the beginning, like the first two stages, it's kind of the strategic situation that pushed, different players to get to the negotiation table and to agree on democracy as the second best solution. So here it's like they got they come to believe that no one, or like neither, of the two parties, they would win, everything. So they would learn by like the experience about this kind of possibility of winning something uh, as kind of second best, or it's a better solution than the possibility of winning nothing at all. So it's kind of, it's not a zero sum, it's like it's a sum game in this sense. uh, so the logic, or the rationality behind this, that these actors, they do not, discount future, uh, because they do not actually eliminate the standard chance, in the future to win the game. So if they lose something, in time A, so in the future, like a different, time point, so they might, win something. So they might have like a victory in the future. So the rationality here, it's kind of, they don't discount future, and they don't have like, any chance that any other actor would turn on the agreement or the pact in order to eliminate, their chance in the future to win, or to take office. um, so the whole idea you have here, the negotiation, actually happened basically between like the incumbents, old regime, like, figures, and like challengers, social and political oppositions. So within like the incumbent, or the old regime forces, you have like two elements, or two forces, two actors: hardliners and reformers and softliners. And then within the opposition camp, you have like radicals and moderates as well. And both camps, they have to actually to exclude, extremists. So they have to exclude radicals from the oppositional camp, and they have to exclude like hardliners from the incumbent, or the old regime camp. These like extremes, they have this winner take all tendencies. Like they have like, they have this orientation towards like, take it all. It's kind of a zero sum game. So democracy is possible when like softliners, they get, together with the moderates in order to reach, a pact, or to have an agreement. So if the moderates actually move closer to the radicals, this would preclude, any chance of democracy possibility, because this would actually increase, this for them would increase their bargaining position, but this would push the other camp, the softliners, to coalesce, with the hardliners, and to open, to close off, any possibility for or any avenues for negotiation, or compromise, or any pact. Um, so Waterbury here, he tried to apply this basically to the Islamic Salvation Front in Algeria, and he tried to withdraw, or to generalize from this case. So he actually painted, all Islamists, with this broad brush, and it was like the chapter was published in 1990. So I was planning, to have a discussion whether or not, this is still applicable after the uprisings, after what we have, like, especially after we have seen in Egypt and in Tunisia, because he actually mentioned, Ghanouchi as well, and he actually he was skeptical about, any kind of perhaps like cheap talk about like Islam and compatibility of Islam and democracy, especially from these forces by a reference to El Ghannouchi in the early 90s. Um, so like any talk about the like any talk from Islamists about democracy, so it might be kind of a tactical ploy from them, and they don't offer any sort of democratic alternative to authoritarianism, but actually they have their own kind of what he mentioned, like a great cause or like a religious cause in order to advance while after reaching power. But 2 points here. So we need to apply this to what happened, actually in Egypt and in Tunisia, in like with like application to Ennahda and like with its leader Al Ghannouchi on the one hand, and what happened, in Egypt on the other hand, and like some sort of like when we talked about different in the week of like the Islamic Revolution and other trends in of Islamist or Islamic movements, especially like Wickham when she talked about Islamist or the Muslim Brotherhood in Jordan and Kuwait and Morocco. So what she mentioned something about she didn't say that directly, but it was like despite like regardless of like these are like monarchies that they had like different kind of political dynamics, but she mentioned something about the Muslim Brotherhood, the constitutional movement in Kuwait, and the Muslim Brotherhood party or the Justice and Development party in Morocco, and the front in Jordan as well. So basically in Morocco and Kuwait, and they had this sort of like being one of different players, oppositional players in the political arena. So that's why it was like they didn't have any kind of electoral weight, in relation or in comparison to uh, other political forces in Kuwait and in Morocco as well. They had like it had like the Morocco as a the regime had like tradition of a strong kind of liberal and secular forces, and in addition to like the religious legitimacy of the monarch or the king, himself. So the she tried to bring in different variable in order to analyze, in order to tease out the similarities and differences between um, like the different Islamic forces in the region. But here like with some empirical like we have like empirical cases, what happened in Egypt and after the uprisings. So you have like Tunisia first, like you have like the Ennahda, like an Islamist party actually managed, to reach out to like secular oppositions or non-Islamist opposition, and they actually, as I mentioned in the first lecture, they managed to form, the troika, government. It was like short-lived government, but they managed to build, some sort of coalition between the Nahda and other um, non-Islamist forces. And when there was kind of a political stalemate and the quartet managed to establish a mechanism of national dialogue and to endorse, to have like a roadmap, Ennahda actually decided, to abide by the roadmap, and they handed over power peacefully. And like El Ghannouchi himself had like, different statements, regarding, this kind of collaboration or the coalition, and to what extent his or Nahda, actually Nahda as a party, the political stand of a Nahda party and the position of religion, and to what extent he had like this kind of social project and the position of religion in this social project. Uh, Not to mention that even before the uprisings, so after 1993, in 2003 and 2005, they actually got together, and they had like this legacy of collaboration between the Nahda and the Takaful and the like secular and non-Islamist parties. So they agreed in 2003, like they signed some sort of declaration or an agreement called like call for Tunis, in order to reassure or to give assurance that they are like deeply committed to the democratic principles and to the like women's rights. So they managed to have like some sort of like intellectual foundation for the relationship between like civil and individual rights, and the existence of like the civil state and the position of religion in the modern and civil state. And they have like 18th October coalition that offered more kind of assertion on the same principles they agreed on in 2003. So that was like for the Tunisian case. For the Egyptian case, which is like uh, perhaps might be like theoretically interesting, that it is not like it's not about the commitment. You might have you had this kind of democracy, perhaps like you have this form of pacted transition. So you have like the like the soft liners or the reformers from the regime, which was like in this case it was like the SCAF. They actually they managed to have like this pact with the like some sort of like moderate opposition, that they didn't adopt any. It was like pragmatic. They adopted this pragmatic approach. So they didn't actually share any kind of revolutionary vision with the youth, or with even like the like ultra conservative group like Salafis. So they managed to carve out a deal in order to enable this transition. But the threat actually or the actually like the behavior of the losers, like in this case like non-Islamist, was like the kind of essential in order to shed light on. So after losing this founding election, so regardless of like a, it was like something actual or perceived, it was like they adjudicated, or they tended to reach out to the military in order to intervene, in order to put an end to this like electoral process or electoral dynamics, or to this form of pact. uh, so perhaps it might be like related to the this sort of expectations and prospects for future winning. Like it needs we need to like to discuss about this. And it might have something related to, because of this kind of rationality about not discounting future, that they might, it's kind of iterative, and they might have a chance in the of winning in the future. So they might have like something related to these this kind of these expectations, or this kind of prospects for future, about changing the rules of the game that would preclude them from winning the elections. But actually nothing really happened with regard to the changing of the rule of the competition in order to buy into um, this argument. So like it was kind of interesting, because it's losers behaviors after like losing the like the founding elections was important. And actually so we need to go back to this form of like these kind of arguments, in order to see to what extent the what happened after the uprisings still vindicated, or actually disproved these kind of hypotheses or arguments. And you have another explanations about these kind of different outcomes of the uprisings, like civil wars and like aborted or failed transitions. So like again, like some studies actually reasserted the role of the coercive apparatuses or the repressive the repressive capacity of the regime. It was actually the like you have like two main points here, like re- reverting it all to these kind of repressive or the existence of the repressive capacity of the regime. It actually overlooked these dynamics and choices made, especially in Egypt and Tunisia. So it's not like it was not easy for the military. It didn't take a decision to overthrow the brotherhood elected president, but it took some sort of like popular mobilizations in order to give like legitimacy to the military establishment to intervene. And in the case of Tunisia as well, like the military actually was kind of neutral, but it didn't say like it's still like in a professional and very well institutionalized, professional, establishment and well institutionalized as Eva Belen actually mentioned. So it actually you couldn't eliminate this. It still had this kind of repressive capacity, but perhaps as Belen mentioned, didn't have the will to crack down or to repress or to intervene in politics or in the political game. So it's still like it's not like the repressive or the size of the military, but perhaps it's much more kind of complex than this. Blen mentioned kind of two layered argument here about the capacity and the will of the coercive and the apparatuses of the regime that would account for authoritarianism in the region. Uh, so here regarding the capacity, so you have here two main factors. What she mentioned, like physical health of the repressive and the coercive apparatuses of the across the region. So these kind of access to economic resources, like geostrategic, location or rents and oil and whatever kind of resources that needed, some material and manpower needed to repress, to have like to increase the capacity, the repressive capacity, and then they didn't eliminate the fact of the international support network as well. So the like physical health plus international support, because like some of these autocrats actually they had long enjoyed this kind of international support because of the potential service to they offered to Western security interests, and especially with regard to oil and terrorist threat to stabilize the region. So the capacity, it's a function of like these kind of like the financial element and international support element. And for the will, it had like something to do with the degree of institutionalization of these coercive apparatuses that are actually very high in Tunisia and Egypt and very low in the Gulf and like in Libya and Yemen in our cases here, in contrary to on contrary to the Egypt and Tunisian cases. So like if they are like patrimonially organized, so they might have the will to suppress or to repress the protesters, and the level of popular mobilizations as well, like high level of popular mobilization would actually undermine this well the willingness of the repressive apparatus to repress protesters. So it's not like it's kind of an interaction between like these kind of repressive and like the coercive apparatuses and the level of like mobilization as well. And we have to distinguish between their capacity on the one hand and their like will on the other hand, to what extent they were willing. And for repression as well, it's here like um, Lieshbach mentioned something about like contradictory impact of repression, that actually it might actually intensify it might not suppress, the mobilization. It might actually lead to the opposite outcome. It might intensify and it did encourage, historically in Bolivia, for example, it did encourage like a massacre of peasants. It actually triggered, more rounds of political mobilization rather than like, quelling protesters or putting an end to any political mobilization. So the case of Syria was like, like important or paradigmatic in this, like with this regard, because like this kind of consistent or unyielding, like repression from Bashar al-Assad should have actually threatened from the very beginning, protesters from like initiating more cycles, of mobilization or protest. But actually, because of, again, the regional intervention as well, it prolonged, the war. So you had like different, like repression or this kind of a structure with like interaction with different other factors related to this kind of level of mobilization, or the pattern of interaction, or the fraction, within the opposition camp. So you have like to, like the case of Tunisia and Egypt, the interaction between different, oppositional camps, the interactions, were very important. And with the case of like Yemen and Libya, like the regional intervention as well, and to what extent it would like, increase, it would increase the capacity of the repression of the existing Saudi and Bahrain, actually increased, the capacity of the of the ruling family in order to smash, the protesters. And in Syria as well, like the competition between like, different, Gulf countries, and later, with the role of, or with the involvement of Syria, of Russia and the United States. It actually it was not only about, the repression, or the repressive capacity of Bashar al-Assad, but like different other factors actually interacted with this, um, with this variable. Um, so you have like, so we like you have these kind of different outcomes at like, right after, the or after, like 7 or 8 years, of the outbreak of the uprisings. And you have like different form of, except for like, Bahrain, that actually ended it in the very early beginning, and then Egypt and Tunisia that managed, to make, to find, their ways, through these kind of social and political mobilizations with different or with different trajectories in both countries. And then you have like, the Yemen and Yemen, the Yemeni and the Syrian cases, and Libya as well, that actually led to triggered, more violence. And perhaps it had, something to do with the legacy of the country, the of like, the state, and the interaction between like the central authority and other like tribes and social forces in society, especially in Yemen and Libya. And this kind of social composition and the sectarian politics in Syria. And then the regional intervention, from different regional forces and proxy wars that actually would account for these outcomes. And this, in order to stabilize, it needed, kind of a double effort, just to reach like to put an end to the civil war, to reach, an agreement with different combatants, first, and then to have like, this kind of transition to whatever, form of the new regime. And obviously Bashar actually survived, this kind of long civil war with the help of the some of the international support or backing. So that's all for the uprisings. Um, so we'll have like, two more lectures to cover. Like, we start out with the Ottoman Empire, and then we are gonna end with Turkey, and like the current, political dynamics and political regime there. Okay, see you on Monday. Bye.